Someone gave an AI zero restrictions, zero budget limits, and zero respect for the laws of physics, and then told it to design the most extreme luxury motorhome concept imaginable. This is what came back. Before we get into it, what you are looking at right now is a fictional AI-generated concept design. No factory, no production line, no delivery date. Nobody is selling this. It is pure imagination. And that is exactly what makes it worth analyzing, because when you remove every real-world constraint, you finally get to see what design actually wants to become. What we have here is a two-story, six-wheeled, armored luxury land fortress with more glass in its walls than most penthouse apartments. And I am going to walk you through every single detail: the exterior, the interior logic, the powertrain theory, and ultimately, whether this concept is a genuine design vision or a beautiful mess. There is one detail at the rear of this vehicle that genuinely stopped me. I haven't decided how I feel about it yet. I am saving it for the verdict. Let's start from the front. The front face of this concept does something that almost no production motorhome has ever had the confidence to do. It makes no apology for its size. Most motorhomes try to soften their bulk. They curve the nose. They taper the roofline. They visually shrink themselves. This one does the opposite. The front face is flat, angular, and deliberately imposing. A wide trapezoidal grille structure flanked by sharp, geometric headlight clusters that run vertically rather than horizontally. That vertical light signature is important. Vertical lighting on a vehicle this wide makes it look taller, not just wide. The designer is leaning into the scale, not hiding it. The logo, a circular crosshair emblem centered low on the nose, reinforces something specific. This is not a leisure brand. This is positioning itself somewhere between a tactical vehicle and a private aircraft. You're not meant to feel like you're going camping. You're meant to feel like you're launching an expedition. That is a very specific emotional target. And right from the front face, it lands. Now step back and look at the full silhouette, because this is where the concept either proves itself or falls apart. What you are looking at is a genuinely two-story structure. Not a pop-top. Not a raised roof section. A full second floor, with a continuous glass band running almost the entire length of the upper level. The roofline is flat and wide, with what appears to be a deployable deck or terrace built into the rear upper section. More on that in a moment. The body is broken into hard geometric panels, flat planes meeting at sharp angles, and every panel junction is outlined in amber LED strips. This is not decorative lighting. Or rather, it is, but it is doing double duty. Those light lines are tracing the architecture of the vehicle. They are making the panel structure readable at a distance. At night, this thing would look like a building driving towards you. The glass-to-body ratio on the upper level is extraordinary. I would estimate that over 60% of the upper sidewall is glass. That is a number you see in high-end architecture. It is almost unheard of in a vehicle of any kind. The structural implications of that are significant, but we will get to that in the powertrain section. The lower body is the contrast. Heavy. Armored. Those angular lower panels read like blast deflection geometry. The juxtaposition is intentional. Fortress below, penthouse above. I want to be honest with you here. Aerodynamics on a vehicle this shape are not the primary design priority. And that is fine, if the powertrain logic supports it. A flat-fronted two-story box is not going to cut through air efficiently. The drag coefficient on something like this would be high. But the amber LED trim lines do follow a path that suggests some attempt at channeling airflow around the upper corners. Whether that is functional or purely aesthetic, I genuinely cannot tell from this render. My instinct says it is aesthetic, but the designer at least thought about it. What I can say is that at the speeds a vehicle like this would realistically travel, long highway cruises, never racing, aerodynamic drag is manageable. It becomes a range equation, not a safety equation. The finish is a cool satin silver gray. Not metallic. Not matte. Satin. That choice is deliberate. Matte reads as aggressive and raw. High gloss reads as consumer luxury. Satin sits in between. It says precision engineered without shouting. Light moves across these panels in a way that constantly changes the vehicle's apparent texture. Static in a photo, it looks like brushed aluminium. In motion, it would shimmer. The amber LED contrast against the silver gray body creates a warmth that the overall form desperately needs. Without that lighting, this concept risks looking cold and industrial. With it, there is an invitation. Come inside. 6 wheels. Not 4. 6. 2 at the front. 4 at the rear in a dual-axle configuration. This is the configuration you see on heavy transport trucks, military vehicles, and extreme overlanders. On a luxury motorhome, it is almost completely unprecedented at this scale. The tires are massive, aggressively lugged off-road rubber that would not look out of place on a mining vehicle. The rims are dark, multi-spoke, and deliberately understated against the drama of the body. They are workhorses, not jewelry. The stance, wide, low-slung relative to the upper body mass, communicates something important. This concept is not designed for one type of terrain. It is designed for all of them. And that raises a question I want you to hold in your mind as we walk inside, because it becomes very relevant when we look at the interior layout. Speaking of inside, what I found when I started mapping the interior from these exterior proportions genuinely surprised me. Let's go in. There are no interior renders for this concept. So what I'm going to do is what I always do in these situations, detective work. I am going to read what the exterior is telling us and reconstruct the interior logic from the proportions, the glass placement, and the design philosophy. This is where it gets interesting. Based on the wheel diameter, those rear tires look to be approximately 45 to 50 inches tall. The overall vehicle height appears to be somewhere between 5.0 and 5.5 meters. That is extraordinary. For context, a standard luxury motorhome runs around 3.8 to 4.0 meters. Divide that height across 2 floors with floor structure between them, and you're likely looking at standing ceiling heights of approximately 2.1 to 2.3 meters on each level. That is full residential ceiling height. Not cramped coach height. You would never crouch. You would never duck. You would simply live with the same freedom of movement you have at home. That single detail changes everything about the experience of being inside this vehicle. Zone layout. From the proportions, the habitable length appears to be somewhere in the range of 12 to 14 meters. That is significant interior real estate. Here is how I think the designer likely intended to divide it. Lower level, cockpit at the front. Service zone, mechanical access, storage, utility systems, running beneath the main living area. A midship entry point via those deployable stairs. Bathroom and wet room toward the rear lower section where water management engineering is most practical. Upper level, the full glass band tells you everything. This is the living zone. A continuous panoramic lounge running the length of the vehicle, transitioning into a kitchen toward the midsection, and a sleeping zone toward the rear where the rooftop terrace access would be located. That layout logic is sound. It separates functions cleanly. It puts the most visually immersive spaces, the lounge, the sleeping area, where the glass is best. It is not accidental design. Someone thought about the human sequence of movement through this space. The living area. Imagine sitting in the upper lounge of this vehicle, parked somewhere remote. Mountains. Desert. Coast. It does not matter. Floor-to-ceiling glass on both sides. The amber light strips tracing the architecture of your ceiling. The vehicle is wide enough, I would estimate close to 3.2 meters of interior width, that you have full sofas on both sides without feeling like you are sitting in a corridor. This is the design's strongest moment. It turns the vehicle into a viewing platform. You are not inside looking out through a window. You are suspended in the landscape. That is a fundamentally different emotional experience, and it is the single most compelling idea in this entire concept. The kitchen. Based on the window positioning midship, the kitchen would sit where natural light is strongest during morning hours, on the driver's side of the vehicle. At the vehicle width available, you could realistically fit a 2-meter run of counter, an induction cooktop, refrigeration, and a sink without compromising circulation space. The design philosophy here, angular, precise, architectural, suggests the interior material language would be something like dark stone surfaces, brushed metal fixtures, integrated appliances flush to the panels. No exposed hardware. No visible joints. The aesthetic that starts outside continues inside. I think that is the right call. The moment you put a conventional RV kitchen inside this exterior, the concept breaks. Sleeping quarters. The sleeping zone would sit toward the rear upper level, directly above the rear dual axle. This is a well-understood positioning principle in high-end motorhome design. The rear axle provides the most stable ride quality point in the vehicle. Less pitch. Less lateral movement. Better sleep. From the rear roofline profile, there appears to be a deployable deck or terrace feature, a section of the upper rear that extends outward when stationary. If that reading is correct, the sleeping area would have direct access to a private outdoor terrace. Private outdoor space at height. In a motorhome. That is genuinely not something I have seen before. That is the detail I mentioned at the start. And I think it is either the best idea in this concept or a structural nightmare. Possibly both. The bathroom. Water engineering in a vehicle this size is not a small problem. But the scale here makes it genuinely solvable in a way smaller motorhomes cannot manage. A full walk-in shower is not just plausible, it is almost mandatory given the positioning of this concept. Gray water management, a pressurized water system fed from a substantial onboard tank, and potentially a water recycling circuit for off-grid sustainability. The footprint exists to do all of it properly. The cockpit. That windshield angle, steep, wide, deeply raked, gives the driver a field of view that is closer to an aircraft than a conventional vehicle. You would see road, horizon, and sky simultaneously. At night, with the interior lit behind you, it would feel like commanding a vessel. Digital instrumentation is a certainty in any near-future realization of something like this. Heads-up display. Autonomous highway capability. A drive-by-wire system that could, in theory, operate without a dedicated driver in approved zones. The cockpit is not just functional here. It is a theater. Smart systems. Climate control learning your preferences by zone. Solar management distributing power between driving range and interior comfort. Connectivity that treats remote locations not as off-grid gaps but as default operating mode. A concept at this level would not have systems you manage. It would have systems that manage themselves. If this were ever engineered for reality, the propulsion logic is not complicated. It is just expensive. Full electric is the only architecture that makes sense at this positioning level. Not hybrid. Not hydrogen, not yet. Pure electric. Here is why. This concept is built around silence, precision, and interior experience. An internal combustion powertrain introduces vibration, noise, exhaust routing, and thermal management complexity that works against every design goal this vehicle is pursuing. Electric eliminates all of that. Now, the range equation. A vehicle of this mass, I would estimate somewhere between 18,000 and 22,000 kilograms fully loaded, would require a battery pack in the 600 to 800 kilowatt-hour range to deliver a realistic 400 to 500 kilometer range. For context, a Tesla Semi carries around 900 kilowatt-hours. A high-spec electric coach in the Yutong or Volvo program runs around 550 to 600 kilowatt-hours. The technology exists. The packaging is the challenge. Dual motors, almost certainly one per axle on the rear dual setup, and a third on the front steer axle, would give this concept all-wheel drive capability across genuinely varied terrain. Those off-road tires are not decorative. In a fully realized version of this, you would be driving something that could cross terrain most luxury vehicles would not attempt. The solar roof integration is visible in the upper deck geometry. And I want to be clear about how to think about solar on a vehicle like this. It is not a range extender. At the energy consumption of a vehicle this size, roof solar contributes maybe 10 to 20 kilometers of equivalent range per day in good conditions. What it is actually for is interior system sustainability when stationary. Running climate, lighting, water heating, connectivity, off-grid, indefinitely in good sun. That is a genuinely useful function. It just needs to be framed correctly. The six-wheel configuration with dual rear axle also means something specific for weight distribution. Spreading the load across 6 contact points reduces ground pressure significantly, relevant if you're taking this off-road or onto surfaces that wouldn't support a conventional heavy vehicle. In a near-future production scenario, autonomous highway capability would be standard. You set the destination. The vehicle drives. You go upstairs and sit in that panoramic lounge with a coffee. That is not a fantasy. That is 5 years away, technically speaking. Alright, here is my honest take. What this concept does genuinely well, and I mean genuinely, not just it looks cool, is the glass-to-structure ratio on the upper level. That decision to turn the entire upper story into a glazed observation deck is the single most architecturally coherent idea in this design. It gives the concept a reason to exist that goes beyond scale. It creates an experience that no other vehicle on Earth currently offers. That is a real design achievement, even in fictional form. What seems impractical, and I will be direct here, is the structural logic of that same glass. Floor-to-ceiling glass panels on a vehicle operating off-road, across rough terrain, at the vibration frequencies generated by those massive tires, is an engineering nightmare. Glass flex, seal integrity, thermal expansion across that much surface area. In a real build, you would spend more of your engineering budget solving the glass problem than the powertrain problem. It is a beautiful idea with a brutal engineering bill. The most impressive detail, and this is what I would point to in any design review, is the coherence of the light language. Those amber LED strips tracing every panel edge, every architectural line of the vehicle, are doing something sophisticated. They are making the vehicle's structure readable. They are not decoration. They are annotation. The vehicle is explaining its own geometry to you. I have not seen that done this deliberately in a motorhome concept before. The one thing I would change specifically is the wheel and tire specification relative to the ride comfort intent. If the upper level is designed as a luxury living environment, those aggressive off-road tires are the wrong choice for the primary use case. They generate road noise and vibration that would undermine everything the interior is trying to achieve. I would retain the 6-wheel configuration. That is the right architecture, but fit it with a touring-biased high-load tire that can handle light off-road without punishing the living space at highway speeds. What this signals about where luxury mobility is going. This concept, fictional as it is part of a broader conversation the design world is having right now. The boundary between architecture and vehicle is dissolving. The best motorhome concepts are no longer designed by automotive studios. They are being designed by architects who happen to need the thing to move. This is one of those. And that shift, I think, is the most interesting development in personal luxury transport in a generation. It is a concept. It is fictional. It is AI-generated. And it is still one of the most resolved motorhome visions I have analyzed on this channel. Tell us in comment. The upper level is almost entirely glass, stunning to look at, but an engineering nightmare in reality. Would you take that trade-off, or would you sacrifice the view for structural integrity? Glass palace or fortress walls? Which matters more to you? Subscribe Vault Motion if breaking down concepts like this, the design logic, The engineering theory, the honest critique, is what you come to YouTube for. Subscribing is genuinely the most efficient way to not miss the next one. New concept drops regularly. I will see you in the next analysis.